Now to the horrific scene inside a home in Virginia. Authorities say a former lieutenant governor shooting and killing his wife in the basement of their home and then taking his own life. Their teenage son and daughter, both home at the time. Here's Pierre Thomas now.
Virginia's lieutenant governor-elect.
He was once a rising Democratic star in Virginia politics, but tonight a tragic and violent ending for Justin Fairfax and his wife. Police say the former lieutenant governor shot his wife Serina multiple times and then turned the gun on himself in a murder-suicide.
In every home, behind every closed door, there's a story waiting to be uncovered. Welcome to Dark Whispers, where we dive deep into the hidden truths of domestic crime and the relationships that turn deadly. If you're drawn to real stories, powerful insights, and the shadows most people avoid, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and step into the whispers they never wanted you to hear. A teenage boy picked up the phone and called 911, not for a stranger, not for somebody on the news, for his mother, bleeding on the basement floor, and his father, upstairs, gone too. Both of his parents, in the same house, on the same night. Let me tell you something. There is no handbook for that. There is no therapy session, no amount of time, no conversation that fully prepares you for what that boy carried out of that house. And the thing that makes this story cut even deeper? His father was not some unknown man. He was one of the most recognized political faces in the entire state of Virginia. Justin Fairfax was the kind of name that made people stop and pay attention. He had climbed to one of the highest offices in Virginia, lieutenant governor, and people were watching him like he was just getting started. Educated, polished, the kind of man who stood at podiums and spoke about justice and progress. His wife, Serina, was no different. She was a dentist, building her own career, her own life, raising their 2 children alongside a man the world thought it knew. From the outside, this family had everything: a beautiful home, 2 professional careers, 2 teenagers who were, by all accounts, just living their lives the way kids do. School, homework, whatever teenagers do on a regular afternoon. Nobody on that street, nobody in that neighborhood would have looked at that house and seen what was coming. Period. But here is the thing about the cases that hurt the most. They almost never look like anything from the outside. The danger was not coming from a stranger. It was not a break-in. It was not somebody with a grudge from the outside world. The threat was already inside the home. It had been living there, eating at the same table, sleeping under the same roof. At some point, Justin and Serina's marriage had reached a place it could not come back from. The details of what broke them down, how long things had been falling apart, what was said, what was done. Those details have not been fully laid out for the public. What we do know is that by the time this story ends, they were in the middle of a divorce. And that divorce, it was described as messy. Now, messy divorces happen every single day in this country. Couples fall apart, lawyers get involved, papers get filed. And most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, people find a way through it. They move out. They move on. Life continues. But Justin and Serina had not moved out yet. They were still sharing that home, still under the same roof, still navigating whatever tension came with 2 people trying to legally separate while physically occupying the same space. Make it make sense. Because here is the part that too many people don't talk about. The period between the decision to leave and actually leaving is one of the most dangerous stretches in any relationship. Domestic violence researchers will tell you that. Advocates will tell you that. The statistics scream it. And yet, for reasons that are real and complicated, finances, the children, logistics, legal timelines, people stay in the same space during that window, and sometimes that window becomes a trap. Justin had recently been served paperwork, legal documents. A court date had been set, the kind of document that makes the reality of a divorce undeniable. No more back and forth, no more maybe. The court was now involved, and there was a date on a calendar that neither of them could ignore. Investigators would later point to that paperwork as a possible spark. Not the only factor. Nobody can reduce something this devastating to a single piece of paper, but a moment that may have shifted something in Justin's mind. A moment where the situation became real in a way he was not prepared to face. Oh, so now, the man who had stood in front of the entire state of Virginia, who had spoken about accountability and leadership, was being handed a document that said his marriage, his household, the life he had built, was being legally dismantled. And instead of doing what hard moments call for, stepping back, seeking help, leaning on someone, he made a choice. A devastating, unforgivable, irreversible choice. Now, we do not know exactly what the days looked like before it happened. We do not know what conversations were had, what arguments took place in that house, what the atmosphere felt like in the hours leading up to that afternoon. What we do know is that the children were home, both of them, a teenage son and a teenage daughter, right there, in that house, on that day. Girl, I need you to sit with that for a second. Those kids were not somewhere else. They were not at a friend's house, not at practice, not away for the weekend. They were home, in the same house where their parents' marriage was falling apart, in the same house where that tension lived every single day. And they had no idea that this particular day would be the last time their lives would ever feel normal. At some point that day, Justin Fairfax went to where his wife was. She was in the basement, and he shot her, multiple times. Serina Fairfax, a mother, a dentist, a woman in the middle of trying to move forward with her life, was shot multiple times and left on that basement floor. Then Justin walked away from that basement and went upstairs, to a bedroom, and he turned the gun on himself, a single gunshot wound to the head, and just like that, in the same house where their children were living, both of their parents were gone. What happened next is the part of this story I think about the most. Their son found her. He went down to that basement and he found his mother on the ground, bleeding. And instead of freezing, instead of falling apart in that moment the way anyone would understand if he had, he picked up a phone. He called 911. He told the dispatcher exactly what he was seeing. His mother, on the ground, bleeding, moving on, because I cannot linger there too long without losing myself. When officers arrived at that home, they found Serina in the basement exactly as her son had described, and they found Justin in an upstairs bedroom, firearm nearby, gunshot wound to his own head, 2 parents, same house, same day, gone, and those 2 teenagers were left standing in the middle of it. When police arrived at that home in Virginia, they were not walking into an unsolved mystery. The scene told its own story almost immediately. Serina was in the basement. Justin was upstairs. The weapon was still there. There was no forced entry, no signs of an outside threat, no other person to chase down. What investigators were walking into was a closed chapter, a tragedy that had already written its own ending before they ever got through the door. But that does not mean the work was over, because in cases like this one, the question is never just what happened. The question is always why. And more importantly, were there signs? Were there moments along the way where someone could have stepped in? Where the system could have caught this before it reached that basement? Let me tell you something. Those are the questions that haunt every detective who works domestic violence cases. Not just this one. Every single one. Because by the time law enforcement is called, it is almost always too late to save the victim. The work becomes about understanding the road that led there, so that maybe, the next road does not end the same way. Detectives began piecing together the timeline. They looked at the divorce proceedings. They looked at the paperwork Justin had been served. They spoke to people who knew the family. They tried to construct a picture of what the atmosphere inside that home had been like in the days and weeks leading up to what happened. And what they kept coming back to was that court date, that document, that moment where the legal system formally stepped in and said, "This marriage is ending, and here is the date we are going to deal with it." Now here is where it gets complicated, because serving someone divorce papers is not a crime. Going to court is not a crime. Serina was doing everything right. She was following the legal process. She was trying to move her life forward the way the system is designed to help people do. And yet, that very process, that legal step toward freedom, may have been the thing that pushed Justin over an edge he had already been standing on. Girl, that is the part of domestic violence that does not get talked about enough. The danger does not always announce itself with black eyes and police reports. Sometimes it looks like a quiet house. Sometimes it looks like two professionals going through a divorce. Sometimes the most dangerous moment is the one right before someone gets out. Investigators also had to reckon with the fact that this was not just any family. Justin Fairfax had been Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. His name was known. His face had been on television, in newspapers, at press conferences, and that public profile meant that every finding, every detail, every piece of this investigation was going to be under a level of scrutiny that most cases never see. The media was already outside. The questions were already being asked, and law enforcement had to do their job carefully, thoroughly, and with the full knowledge that the world was watching. What they confirmed publicly was straightforward. This was a murder-suicide. Justin shot Serina. Then he shot himself. The children were home. The son called 911. That was the official finding. And as painful as it is to sit with, that finding left a community and a country with more questions than answers. I want to step outside of this one house for just a moment. Because as specific as this story is, as unique as Justin Fairfax's name and position made it, this story is not unique at all. Not really. Between 2020 and 2024, there were more than 11,000 murders in this country that involved people in domestic relationships. 11,000. That is not a statistic you can just read and move on from. That is 11,000 Serinas. 11,000 people who were killed not by a stranger, not by someone they feared on the street, but by someone they had loved, someone they had built a life with, someone who knew exactly where they slept. And the cases that get the most attention, the ones that make national news, the ones with recognizable names attached, those are a fraction of 11,000. Most of those cases happened in homes nobody was watching. Most of those victims did not have news cameras outside their door the next morning. Most of those families grieved quietly, without a single headline. So when we talk about Justin and Serina Fairfax, we are not just talking about one family in Virginia. We are talking about a pattern, a crisis, a failure that happens over and over again in this country, across every zip code, every income bracket, every profession, every race. Domestic violence does not have a type. It does not care about your career, your neighborhood, or how things look from the outside. Make it make sense. Because how do you have a man who held one of the highest offices in the state, a man who spoke about justice and governance, a man who people trusted with their vote, and that same man could not find another way out of a difficult moment in his own home? How does that happen? How does someone with every resource, every option, every avenue available to them choose that? That is not a question with a clean answer, and I am not going to pretend it is. But it is a question worth sitting with, because the answer matters for every family trying to navigate a painful separation right now. It matters for every person sharing a roof with someone they are trying to leave. It matters for every child who goes to school every day, not knowing what the energy is going to be like when they get home. Oh, so now, we have to reckon with the fact that access to resources does not automatically equal safety. Education does not automatically equal safety. Status does not automatically equal safety. The only thing that creates safety is intervention. Real, honest, sometimes uncomfortable intervention, whether that comes from a friend, a family member, a counselor, or the legal system itself. And sometimes, too many times, that intervention comes too late. The children. But before we get to the courtroom, I need to come back to those kids, because I refuse to let them get lost in the details of this story. A teenage son and a teenage daughter, both home, both alive when police arrived, both left behind in a situation that no child should ever have to survive. The son, and I want you to think about how much strength this took. That boy found his mother bleeding on the basement floor, and his first instinct was to call for help. Not to run, not to shut down, to call 911 and tell them what he was seeing. That is not something a child should ever have to do. And the fact that he did it, the fact that he held himself together long enough to make that call, says something about him that words cannot fully capture. But here's the thing. Making that call does not mean he was okay. Being strong in a moment does not mean the moment does not break you later. And both of those children, wherever they are now, whoever is raising them, however their lives have continued, are carrying something that most people will never fully understand. Period. The trauma of witnessing parental violence, even indirectly, even without seeing it happen in real time, reshapes a child. The sounds, the discovery, the aftermath, the police, the questions, the news cameras outside the house, the faces of people at school the next day who saw it on the internet. All of it lands on a child in ways that take years, sometimes a lifetime, to process. And yet, their names have largely stayed out of the headlines. Which is right. Which is how it should be. But their story is part of this story. Their pain is part of what we are talking about when we talk about the cost of domestic violence. It is never just the people in the room. It ripples outward. It touches everyone who loved the people involved. And in this case, the people who loved Serina most were right there in that house.
Horrible news for the family, certainly a traumatic event for those children to live through.
Their son calling 911 after finding his mother in the basement.
She's laying on the ground, bleeding.
Justin Fairfax discovered in an upstairs bedroom.
I think this is going to be our subject. He's got a firearm with him, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head.
Police say Fairfax, an attorney, and his wife Serina, a dentist, were going through a messy divorce, but still living in the same home. They say Justin Fairfax had recently been served paperwork about an upcoming court date.
That may have been a spark, and detectives will figure that out, that led to this tragedy here.
There was no arrest in this case. There was no trial. There was no defendant sitting in a courtroom waiting for a jury to decide his fate. Justin Fairfax made sure of that when he turned that gun on himself. And that is something that sits heavy with a lot of people. Because as much as the justice system is flawed, as much as courtrooms do not always deliver what victims deserve, there is still something that families need from that process. Something that a verdict, even an imperfect one, can give you. A trial gives you a public record. It gives you witnesses on a stand. It gives you a moment where the state looks a grieving family in the eye and says, "We see what happened here, and we are naming it." Justin took that away, not just from Serina, from his children, from her family, from everyone who loved her and deserved to hear her story told in full, out loud, in a room built for exactly that purpose. So what was left was a police report, a finding, a press conference, and a community trying to make sense of something that does not make sense no matter how many times you turn it over. Virginia's political world went quiet in a way that felt different from the usual pause after a public tragedy, because this was not just a former official who had passed away. This was a former official who had killed his wife. Those are two very different conversations, and the people who had stood beside Justin Fairfax, who had supported his career, who had shaken his hand at fundraisers and rallies, they had to sit with that. They had to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the man who walked down to that basement. Some people struggled with that reconciliation publicly. Others went silent. And Serina, the woman at the center of all of it, deserved better than to have her death become primarily a story about his career. Let me be clear about that. Serina Fairfax was a dentist. She was a mother. She was a woman who was in the process of choosing herself, of making the hard, legal, dignified decision to end a marriage that was no longer working. She did everything right. She filed the papers. She waited for the court date. She stayed in that house because leaving, truly leaving, takes time and resources and logistics that the outside world does not always account for. And she paid for that wait with her life. That is the legacy of this case that matters most. Not his name, not his title, not the political footnotes that will follow this story in whatever archive it ends up in. What matters is that a woman who was trying to get out did not make it out, and her children are left to grow up with that truth. Girl, if you are in a situation where the relationship is over but you are still sharing a space, please hear this. The window between deciding to leave and actually leaving is real. The danger in that window is real. You do not have to navigate that alone. There are people, there are organizations, there are hotlines, real humans on the other end of a phone, who understand exactly what that window feels like, and who can help you move through it safely. Because Serina's story is not just a tragedy. It is a warning. And warnings only mean something if somebody actually listens. Between 2020 and 2024, more than 11,000 people were killed by someone they were in a relationship with. 11,000 families who got a phone call, or a knock on the door, or a moment where life split into before and after. And the number does not go down on its own. It goes down when we start having honest conversations, when we stop treating domestic violence like a private matter, when we check on our people, really check. Not just the surface level "how are you doing" check, but the sit down, close the door, I am really asking kind of check. Oh, so now, the question this case leaves us with is not about Justin Fairfax's political legacy. It is not about what his career could have been or what his name used to mean. The question is about Serina, about what her life could have looked like on the other side of that divorce, about who her children would have become with their mother in the room, about what she was building, professionally, personally, that she never got to finish. Those are the questions worth carrying. Moving on is what the world does after a headline fades. The news cycle moved. Virginia moved. The political conversations moved. But those two teenagers did not get to move on the way the rest of the world did. They woke up the next day, and the day after that, and every day since, in a life that was permanently altered inside a house that was supposed to be safe. I said what I said. Domestic violence is not always a black eye and a police report. Sometimes it is a man in a suit. Sometimes it is a house in a nice neighborhood. Sometimes it is a divorce in progress and a court date on the calendar. Sometimes it is the last place anyone would think to look, and that is exactly why we have to keep looking. Rest in peace, Serina Fairfax. You deserved so much more than what that house gave you on that day, and to the 2 young people she left behind. I hope the world has been gentle with you. I hope somebody has shown up for you the way your mother would have wanted. And I hope that one day, not today, maybe not for a long time, but one day, you find a version of peace that feels like it belongs to you. To everyone watching, thank you for being here. Thank you for caring enough to sit with a story this heavy. Share this video if it moved you, because somewhere out there, somebody needs to hear it. And if that somebody is you, reach out. You do not have to carry this alone. We will see you on the next one.